Yes, sir, Richard.
That also was the period in which, of course, the Christians were being persecuted.
The Messianists were being persecuted, yes. The Messianists. The Proto-Orthodox, along with the Gnostics, along with the Docetists, along with the Ebionites, anyone who claimed to be a follower of Jesus, intermittently, from time in, time out, you're right, there were persecutions that were particularly in the 3rd century.
So that could put a fire under people, is what I'm trying to say, to try to come to understanding how they're relating to their God and to...
Beautifully said. And how we relate to our church.
That's the first thing. Second thing I wanted, in insight perhaps, we throw around 100 years. We're saying
Yeah.
first century, 100 years of the church. Well, in our minds, we have families that live 70 years, 80 years.
Not back then.
You're dealing with 30 years, perhaps, in a generation.
Yeah, Jesus was an old man.
You're speaking maybe 3 generations, father to son, father, so to speak, mother to daughter. So
very quick time.
So when you think of this, you have to think of it as a very passionate time in the church.
Yes.
A lot of, with all, as I say, with all the churches under the gun. But additionally, it's a rapid moving group of people.
Right.
It's not as we think of it.
Tumultuous things going on in the world.
Like a quick generation, so it's like mother to son, but it's happening a lot quicker than the way we would. In
crisis after crisis after crisis.
Exactly.
Yeah, these things don't happen. It's so beautiful what you're saying, Richard. Thank you.
Just to put it in its development.
To put it in a perspective, theology, including Mariology, does not happen in an armchair, devotional armchair. Okay, or listening to a Scott Hahn conference. It happens in the crucible. It happens in crisis and times of change and pain and sorrow and upheaval. And this was that in those first few centuries of the church. So Shepherd of Hermas, I'll just sum this up. Beautiful, mystical, it's not heretical, it just wasn't canonical. A beautiful document that mystically reflects on the church as daughter virgin, as fruitful mother, in its pre-existence as a bride and related to the goal of the world's creation. So one can see how, given enough time, the following parallels could evolve. In Genesis, we have the man saying to the woman, Ish saying to Isha, Hadam saying to Hadam, this one at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one shall be called Isha, for out of her Ish this one has been taken. John 2:4, Jesus said to her, woman, how does this concern affect me? My hour has not yet come. Now, in the original context of John, that was a rebuke, as we're going to see in the Bible Alive. But once you canonize this and you put it against the backdrop of all that mystical, ecclesiological stuff, now that has to have a deeper, more mystical meaning, right? When he calls her woman, right? Scott Hahn? So that deeper, more mystical meaning, she's Eve. Jesus and Mary share the same flesh, just like Ish and Isha, Hadam, share the same flesh, man and woman. The Johannine Jesus, the new Adam, because now it's put together with all these other things, see, calls Mary woman. It makes sense. Was that actually in the mind of in the literal sense of the Johannine author? No, but that's a spiritual understanding of the text of John, a mystical. Whereas the old Eve prompted the old Adam to bring evil into the world, the beginning of the glory witnessed begin when the new Eve requests of the new Adam, they have no wine. The giving and provision of wine is caught up in the hour of Jesus by which he saves the children of God. Genesis 3:6, the woman saw that the tree was good for food, pleasing to the eyes, desirable for gaining wisdom. So she took some of its fruit and ate it. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Luke 1:38, Mary said, behold, I am the slave girl of the Lord. May it be done unto me according to your word. She reverses Eve. Eve's disobedience and sin is reversed in Mary's obedience. The old Eve believed the dragon and doomed humankind to sin and death. But the new Eve believed Gabriel and opened hope and salvation for humankind. The old Eve was no. The new Eve is yes. Genesis 3:15, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will strike at your head while you strike at his heel. John 19. Now, this is not being written with like, oh, let's write something. John's not sitting here going, I'm going to write something now and tie it in with Genesis. But as it got canonized, that's what happened mystically. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple there, whom he loved, the Johannine Jesus group, he said to his mother, woman, there he goes, calling her woman again. That's Eve, right? Behold your son. Then he said to the disciple, behold your mother. And from that hour, the disciple took her into his home. There's a lot of Marian devotion that can come from that, because think about it. Aren't we all beloved disciples of God? Aren't we all beloved disciples of Jesus? Who here is not a beloved disciple of Jesus? Or at least not called? Who here is not called to be a beloved disciple of Jesus Christ? Nobody's raising their hands. So aren't you all then in this mystical understanding of John? Somehow a daughter or a son of your sister and fellow creature made your mother Mary? Yes or no? Yeah, but notice, sorry EWTN, that's not just, a parent. This is not a connect the dots. And then you have Revelation 12:17. Then the dragon became angry with the woman. Oh, is that Mary? No, that's a giant constellation we call Virgo, the pregnant woman. In the Greek tradition, Dike, the goddess of justice, and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring. This is actually taking place in the story of the book of Revelation, in the vision, set of visions that comes from the first week of creation. But later on, the woman, because they lose the original meaning of the book of Revelation, which is highly symbolic, it becomes talking about, it's got to be talking about the church. That's who the woman is. The woman is the church clothed with the sun. And then that's the next step. It's Mary. These last two witnesses, Justin and Irenaeus, in combination with the Proto-Evangelium of James, accelerated the growth of Marian symbolism by 200 Common Era. The Mary-Eve parallelism continued on developing in the works of the Syrian poet Ephraim, the Cappadocian Gregory of Nyssa, and the Latin father Ambrose. But before moving on and taking our break, what Marian theme was it that most concerned the 2nd century Messianist literature? The virginal conception of Jesus. And why that was a concern was because they were most interested in, the Proto-Orthodox fathers of the church, in preserving Jesus' true humanity away from the Docetists and the separationist Christologies of the Gnostics. The conception of the child Jesus is mentioned only by Matthew and by Luke. And there is no doubt that for them, conception through a Holy Spirit in the womb of the Virgin Mary is meant to have theological importance, involving the creative power of God and the uniqueness of the moment in which the Messiah was sent. But beyond that, there is also the historical issue. Was the child conceived without the intervention of a human father? Was it just symbolic, this story? Or is it real? We Catholics affirm that in addition to it being, yes, heavily symbolic and rich with meaning, no, it really did happen. But we have to grapple